I finally made a Bloodless Scream build. The worst part is it's kind of good. So I guess let's go ahead and roll this bean footage and let me introduce you to the freezing Lotus Necromancer. This one's going to be a little bit hard to explain, but I promise it might be worth your while. Walking into Season 9, the developers finally said, hey, we're going to do our best here. Let's fully revive Bloodless Scream, arguably the most sought after and asked about unique item in the game as far as my viewership has been concerned. Every single season, since the very beginning when this item was first introduced, people have been asking the question, can you make a Bloodless Scream build? It had a really cool concept. It had this sub-theme of chilling and freezing, which is something that the Necromancer had for a very long time and has largely been forgotten and replaced with fear, which I think is a strict downgrade. And I promise you, I've been lobbying against it with the devs since they made that change. But back to the story at hand. Bloodless Scream has long been a fan favorite, and they finally juiced this thing to the point where I don't feel bad or clickbaity or like I'm towing you around just selling you snake oil. It's actually a good item, but it's almost certainly not because of the thing that you would first think. Instead, it's actually just one of the single affixes on the weapon that we're looking to scale here for this build, and then everything else on it kind of just allows us to build a pretty decent Sever Necromancer, so we don't have any lulls in our damage output. Now, if you've been a longtime rogue or sorceress enjoyer, you've probably seen some combination of this particular affix on other builds, most notably on the item Azurath. The lucky hit chance to be able to apply shadow damage, which can come as a greater affix, and not only that, we can triple masterwork crit it, means that we have a really powerful base of damage to be able to scale, because this thing is bugged, meaning that gaining more attack damage is actually a double dip. Not only do you attack faster, meaning more chances to proc it per second, but it is a direct multiplier of the base damage. And if you didn't know, anytime you could take the base damage of effect and directly multiply it before you scale everything else, you probably have some kind of powerhouse on your hands. And while nobody may be necessarily impressed with a tier 85 clear, I'm going to go over just how much power is currently missing on this build and what it would look like in its ideal state. And not only that, this is just my first pass at it. While I've tried out a couple different setups to see what would work best, I definitely do think I've hit it on the head with this one, but there's definitely room for improvement. But if you've always been interested in being something like the Lich King, just walking around freezing everything with your darkness, doing massive shattering amounts of damage, as well as trying to get into some nitty-gritty details about how some more archaic and kind of ridiculous stats in this game work, then this one is probably the build for you. And again, the best part about it is that it's not just a meme. It is a perfectly well-functioning Sever Necromancer build, meaning that before you try to build into this stat, you could actually just equip this thing early on and build a very competent build. Sever itself right now is already cleared pit tier 103, and while this does slightly less damage than a normal Sever build would do, we're still using the core aspects that empower that as well, in addition to being able to sneak out this huge damage proc from this lucky hit ability. So before I bore you with any more yapping, let me go ahead and explain the mechanic that we're dealing with here so you understand what the rest of the build is trying to do. I also have a build planner down in the description below. I also have timestamps, so if you feel like you understand stuff, you can just jump around. You're not going to offend me. I don't want to be wasting your time. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to jump into mechanics right now. I guess we'll finish killing off this boss here, and we can get a better understanding of what Bloodless Scream offers you. On paper, Bloodless Scream has some pretty solid stats going for it. The base intelligence is just required on every single weapon. The lucky hit chance to be able to restore resource is also found on every single legendary weapon in the game at this point. And then it has two very unique stats. One, it grants additional skill ranks to darkness skills, which you can see right here without masterworking on it is 8 ranks to darkness skills. So my Sever is already 12 ranks additional on Sever right now without having to really invest anything into it. I have 13 ranks in Soul Rift, and each individual one of our skills is getting more and more out of this if it happens to be a darkness skill. The aspect itself says a lot of words, but the TLDR on it is that darkness skills, so not shadow damage, but darkness skills will chill enemies, and that they will deal up to 200% or 3 times bonus damage to either frozen enemies or bosses. So this just works 100% of the time on a boss. You would need to freeze elites, meaning you have about a 50% uptime on this. And then the secondary part, this 800 times damage, blah, 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 blah. This is nothing. It does freeze the entirety of the screen, which is like kind of ridiculous. I think it's weirdly interacting with Soul Rift and how big of a radius that has, but I'm constantly freezing the whole screen with this thing. So if you want to bring this into places like Hordes or out into Helltide, or even in the Undercity, you're going to be crowd controlling the entire screen. But all of that is just there to make it so that Sever is basically the best synergy with this thing, but we're looking at this lucky hit chance to be able to deal shadow damage. Let's go ahead and show it in a planner because I think it'll make a lot more sense there. If we were to take a Bloodless Scream with a GA on this lucky hit chance and then triple Masterwork crit it, you get all the way up to 36,450 shadow damage. Now that's a little bit difficult to really conceptualize, right? Well, let's go ahead and compare it to something like Sever. Sever is going to deal 253% of my weapon damage. Yes, it says a very big number right there. Actually, ignore that for right now. That includes things which scale your stats, which the weapon won't show on this number. But what is 253% of your weapon damage? To be able to figure out what your weapon damage even is as a starter, you need to understand how weapon damage is calculated. And while there is a DPS number here, that 596, we actually don't want to use that at all. Weapon damage is calculated as the minimum damage and the maximum damage added together divided by 2, or the average. So right here, that would be the 530 and the 794. This is equal to 530 plus the 794 divided by 2. So our weapon damage is 662. So if Sever is going to do 253% of our weapon damage, we just multiply that number by 2.53. So we have our 253%, and what that means is we take this number and we multiply it by this number divided by 100, and we get a weapon damage base of 1,674 damage. That's a really good amount to be able to scale off of. But let's remember what the weapon damage effect is on Bloodless Scream. Bloodless Scream's starting damage is 36,450. So to be able to calculate what percentage of weapon damage that is, let's do it in reverse. So we take our 36,450. We know our base damage is the 662 of our weapon. So what percentage is that? Well, we just take this number and we divide it by this number, and then we multiply that by 100 so that we get it as a percentage. And you'll see that this effect is 5,506% of your weapon damage. Yeah, it's a big number. And it goes even further than that because there's just a weird bug in this game. Lucky hit chance to be able to do a flat number of damage. So on Azurath, this item, as well as things like the Elemental Surge Temper, directly multiply with your attack speed. And I don't mean you attack faster, so technically speaking, you trigger it faster. No, I mean however much attack speed you have multiplies that damage amount. And since you can get up to 100% attack speed in cap 1, and you can get up to 100% attack speed in cap 2, that means that in a perfect world, you could triple this base damage. So when you start off as a base proc, with that much damage on it, you just have to ask a couple questions. 1, how do I proc it faster and more often? And 2, what kind of multipliers can I put on the build to make it better? So we actually get to use the base skill Sever to be able to accomplish 2 of those things right off the bat. With my bonus lucky hit chance I have on this build with a very, very imperfect version of Fists of Fate, I'm at a base 116% lucky hit chance for the skill Sever. And this is every single time that Sever deals damage. So when it travels through a target and when the Sever actually spins. Add on to that the Reaping Lotus aspect, hence why we're calling this Freezing Lotus. Reaping Lotus makes it so that Sever shoots out 3 more projectiles that all do damage twice. So this one aspect is going to take my skill and quadruple the number of damage instances. Not only quadrupling the damage that Sever is doing, but on top of that, effectively multiplying the chance to trigger this by 4. But it's actually even better than that, because each individual damage instance can each individually trigger this. In a perfect world, you could actually trigger this effect 8 times per cast. More often than not, we're only triggering it between 1 to 3 times per cast, and that's the secondary mechanic that you have to understand here. While Sever has a 116% chance to trigger, you have to multiply that by the base effects chance. So it's 116% multiplied by 40%. So if I were to take 116 and multiply that by 40%, you'll notice that I only have a 46.4% chance to be able to trigger this, which means it's triggering less often than 1/2 the time per damage instance, and that's why we're only getting between 1 to 3 triggers per cast. Yes, you could get all the way up to 8, you could also get 0, but we're trying to normalize this. We're trying to find the average chance of proccing it. Reaping Lotus has the added benefit that's going to make Sever the skill deal more damage. Remember how I said that basically nothing on this really works for the proc damage? Like, it's not a darkness skill, so that doesn't increase the proc damage. The darkness skill ranks don't increase it either. The intelligence obviously does, but that's just par for the course. That works for everything. Well, rather than leave all of these stats on the table completely unused, basically wasting them, Sever is picking up the slack. It's only doing about, I don't know, about a quarter to maybe an eighth of the damage of the proc, but it's doing it consistently. And oddly enough, Blood to Scream is kind of a good enough weapon where Sever is doing enough of a good amount of damage where you're consistently getting these DPS output even when the proc isn't happening. Add on to that just as many sources of lucky hit chance as you could possibly put. Obviously, Fist of Fate comes to mind. Now, I have a GA on the lucky hit chance. I only Masterwork crit it 1 time. We would obviously want to Masterwork crit this 3 times if we could, but you'll notice that I have an abysmally small roll on the critical strike chance, and I only have a single GA. While the attack speed is actually super important because we need to be able to hit 100% attack speed, to be able to get that double bonus on the not only attacking faster, but the actual multiplier for the damage effect itself. But this crit chance and this attack speed being higher would actually help to basically bridge the gap where I don't have to use all of these shoehorned in mechanics that I currently am, and that's where a lot of the damage on this build is currently missing from. I just have bad gear. Like, this is my amulet. It's a GA intellect. It has attack speed. I would love for it to be a GA attack speed, but you'll notice I rolled Fueled by Death on it, and as well as needing to put total armor because I don't have enough Paragon points to be able to cap my armor without it. Add on to that, basically none of my aspects are actually perfect at this point. And right there, bare minimum, is already like another like 10 or 15% damage on top of what you're already seeing that is missing just from this one item. But now that we understand the mechanics of what's happening, how the base damage is scaling, how we're looking to trigger it, what else can we do on this build to further increase its average damage output so you're not sitting there waiting for procs, which if you've never played a proc build before is really feast or famine. You'll just notice that you don't do any damage and then all of a sudden you do a ton of damage. Again, we want to try to make it really consistent. The great part about Sever is that Sever's unique boots, Grease of the Empty Tomb, actually allow you to get all the way up to chance for Sever to deal double damage on your boot slot. Add on to that a huge amount of damage reduction, Sever's size, that all of the projectiles can hit every target simultaneously, and then a little bit of additional AoE damage on the ground, which according to the last time that I tested it, which I have to admit is at least like 2 or 3 seasons ago, could trigger lucky hit chance. Can it right now? Not too sure. A little bit difficult to figure that out. But bare minimum, this boot slot alone is doubling our Sever damage as well as just giving us really good additional stats. Things like Blood Moon Breaches giving you an additional huge damage multiplier, another great place to be able to add on critical strike chance so you can reach it without having to use things like Grasping Veins. Obviously, the Fist of Fate that we already talked about. Yes, I have a Shroud of False Death. Yes, I have an Error Perdition. They're best in slot items. What are you going to do, sue me? We're already into the 2nd week of the season. Yes, you could be using legendary items, and you could also be using things like Godslayer Crown, which grants you a damage multiplier, gives you some additional stats, which are nice for your build. But yes, these are going to be the best in slot. While you can just use the Sever Necromancer guide, which I'll also link down below, which has a lot more, like starter and leveling setups and ancestral setups. It's the typical build guide that you'll find on Maxroll. Building into Sever and then transitioning into this, once you actually have the capital to do so and the gear to do so, would probably be your best bet. The other cool thing about this build in general is that the skill tree basically looks the exact same as a Sever skill tree would. Book of the Dead, you get more shadow damage. That's awesome. More vulnerable damage. That's awesome. More crit damage. That's awesome. If you have really bad gear, you could go with the attack speed here, be able to not only get up to 100% attack speed, but in addition to that, maximize that multiplier for the base effect damage. And then the Paragon is the exact same pound for pound that you would get with a Sever build. You're just looking for things that will increase shadow damage or your crit multipliers, Flesh Eater for additional multipliers, etc. A lot of great options to be able to get more maximum life or more survivability, a ton more maximum resistance in all life. You can get a huge amount of armor from multiple boards. So all these things can help with maxing out everything. But you might notice we are a little bit low on armor, and I'm not going to lie to you. When you're using this many unique items all in a row, getting maximum armor is very hard. So this is definitely going to be for the people who do not mind utilizing incense, so like Song of the Mountain, as well as Soothing Spices, and all of a sudden, boom, we're above armor cap, boom, we're above res cap, or at least the base res cap of 75%, and Right Here is going to help with that as well. Even throwing on just a little bit of additional intellect from the Sage's Whisper gets you up to that cap. So now let's have a very honest conversation about like how powerful do I think that this is? I was able to very easily clear out that pit tier 85. I think I had like 5 or 6 minutes left on the clock, which is actually like barely good for where I'm at right now. I think that there's, I don't know, another 50 to 80% damage just on getting better gear than what I currently have that's available on the build. After that, there's probably like another 50% damage from leveling up all of the glyphs that I have and getting above Paragon 208, and then getting perfect masterwork crits on the stuff that I have as opposed to what I currently do. That's maybe another like 20 to 30%. So I see this build easily getting up into the 90s, maybe a bit higher if you're willing to fish as well. And at that point, we're actually talking about like an A tier build, all based around Bloodless Scream. That's kind of impressive. Now, I do still have a lot of issues with this weapon. Most notably, it just kind of only works with Sever, and on Sever, it is a strictly worse version of a regular weapon that you could have. But as far as the proc effect is, like this very interesting thing that we get to do with it, that is cool. I just generally wish that the entirety of the unique item wasn't effectively wasted, except for that one stat if you're looking to scale it as hard as possible. Now, while we're able to be smart and build into Sever to be able to recoup some of these losses, it's still just strictly worse than like a regular core skill build. So hopefully the developers are able to continuously iterate on this thing. Sorry, let me go ahead and kill these bad guys who all decided to pop up on me and take off my amulet. But hopefully the developers are willing to like continue to see some of the issues that Bloodless Scream experiences. Maybe they're just going to leave it like this. That's fine. If they do, the only thing that I would say is I would love if this said your shadow darkness chills enemies and deals increased damage to frozen enemies and bosses. That would be sick. I don't think that locking this to darkness skills is somehow stopping it from being abused by other things, and instead is just limiting its own ability to scale its own damage. But imagine if this thing said triple the damage that that lucky hit thing does. That would be cool as all hell. No pun intended there. But there you go. Here is your Freezing Lotus Necromancer. Here's your Bloodless Scream Necromancer. It's very cool. I'm glad that it worked a lot better than I was expecting it to. I don't think I'm ever going to make like an official fully built out build guide on Maxroll, but obviously, again, the planner is down in the description. It's also in the pinned comment if you want to go check it out yourself. And if there's like a lot, and I mean a lot of interest in this thing, I could talk about putting different progression points down in the planner and potentially things like a speed farming version and things like that. Let me know down in the comments though if that's what you're looking for. If you're brand new to the channel, consider subscribing. You don't want to miss out on anything like this as we continue to get into the season. And I finally have time to go test out all the other crazy cool builds. I think next up on the chopping block is going to be Shadow Blight Necromancer, so we can iterate on that. A lot of people have been doing some cool stuff with it. O's just cleared out Pit Tier 110, making it our strongest Necromancer build. And I definitely have a few things to learn from the setup that they have. So look forward to an update coming on that as well after I have my opportunity to be able to test it in this season. But that's enough of me yapping. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.